segment, I like to discuss how to properly open up a bottle of sparkling wine. Champagne, Cava, Prosecco, California sparkling wine. These all come with a caged cork, and this presents a little bit of an extra step or two in the process. And for service staff members who are not completely proficient with this, one of the biggest recommendations that I can make is to practice, practice, practice. There's always bottles that are served. Most restaurants will serve a sparkling wine. Take a little opportunity before service starts. Ask the bartender or manager if you can practice on a bottle or two that they know might be open for that service segment, and become proficient. Make sure though, when you are opening it up, you're not just kind of standing there and cracking it open, but you're actually going through the same process that I'm going to go through in a minute, and really create and practice the proper techniques for opening up a bottle of sparkling wine. So I've got a bottle of sparkling wine here, and I'm going to do the same thing that I would do if I had a normal bottle of wine. I'm going to go, once the guest is ordered, I'm going to go to the bar or the service bar or the cellar, wherever it's kept, to retrieve the bottle. Before I get back to the table, there's two things that I want to do. First of all, I want to check and make sure that this is actually the correct bottle of wine that the guest ordered, because I don't want to waste the time going to the table and having to go back. And I also want to make sure that if there's any terms or names on this bottle, I want to become familiar with them before I get to the table. I just want to read through the name of the producer, the type of wine it is, the varietal, the region that it comes from. I want to double check the vintage, and I just want to make sure that I have all of these things set in my mind, so when I get back to the table, I can go through them efficiently for my guest and make sure that I'm confident in how to pronounce and say all these things. So in this case, I've got a bottle of J Cuvée 20, which is a California sparkling wine made in Sonoma, and this happens to be a non-vintage, or it doesn't carry a vintage designation. And so when I get to the table, I'm going to say that this is J Vineyard sparkling wine, Cuvée 20 from Sonoma, and it is a non-vintage wine. And once my guests acknowledge that this is the correct bottle, assuming that it is, then I'm going to go through the steps of opening this wine. Now, once I've established that this is the correct bottle of wine, there's a couple simple steps for opening it up that I want to make sure I follow. First of all, I've presented this wine as I would present any normal bottle of wine, cork finished bottle of wine. I'm going to hold the bottom of the bottle in my right hand, and I'm going to have the top bottle in my left hand. I'm right-handed, so this is the most efficient way for me to do it. I'm then going to take the bottle and turn it upright if I've been holding it down a little bit, and I want to make sure that this label never turns away from the guest. I always want to make sure that the label faces the guest. And most producers of sparkling wine know this, and they have their closures calibrated so that it is actually lined up for you to be able to do this. It's usually the case, especially amongst higher-end producers and champagne producers. Sometimes with the lower priced wines, it's not always the case, and you might have to turn it a little bit. But in this case, we do. So the first obstacle that you have is actually the foiled capsule itself. And for the most part, producers have perforated little edges that run around where you're going to want to take this capsule off on the top. And they even put little tabs. And this producer has thoughtfully put a little tab on here. Most champagne and cava producers do that. I'm not very trusting of this tab all the time, because I think it's not always calibrated properly and sometimes can tear. But in this case, it is coming off fairly easily. If you just take a little bit of care and tear that capsule off with the tab, without just kind of yanking and pulling it, then I think you'll create a nice kind of smooth cut, and that's kind of important. I then want to loosen up the foil that's on here and take it off so that it's not in my way. Put that in my pocket or my apron, and now I'm ready to go. It's at this point that I want to make sure I have my napkin or serviette, and I like to hold this in my hand, in my fingers, just between my index and middle finger. And what this does is it puts it in a spot where it's not really in the way, but it allows me to have it ready in case I need it to catch any drips or bubbles. I like to straighten up the foil a little bit, just make sure it's nice and neat. And at this point, it's really critical that you do one thing, and you do this for the rest of the time until the bottle of wine is open. You take your thumb and you put it on top of the cork, okay? And this is important because there is pressure in this bottle, and once I loosen this cage up, this cork really becomes a weapon, okay? And if I'm not in control of it, it can fire off and hit the wall, the ceiling, a guest, land on the table, break a glass, etc. So I want to make sure I'm going to keep my thumb right up on top of that bottle, and it's not going to move the entire time I open it up. Now, each of these bottles has a little key to the cage, and this one is right here. So what I want to do is I actually want to pull that key down to a 90-degree angle away from the bottle, and I'm going to use that key to loosen the cage. So remember, put my thumb on top, keep it there. I'm going to give 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 twists usually does it, maybe a little half twist, and now I've got my cage loose. So I've opened up a little ring. I then pull this aside left, right, and just loosen it away from the little notches in the bottle that are holding it down. Remember, at this point, this is basically a loaded weapon, and I really do not want to take my hand off of that. So properly turn the bottle over onto a 45-degree angle so that it is shaped like this, and this is going to be the best angle for opening up a bottle of wine. So now what I want to do is I actually want to take my hand, I still haven't moved it away from the top of that cork, and I want to place it around the cork and the cage. I've got my bottom hand, my right hand, on the bottom of the bottle, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to gently turn the bottom of the bottle. I don't want to turn the top. And almost immediately I could feel a little bit of pressure on that cork as it loosens from the bottle. Twist left, right, and okay. I've kept it under control. I didn't let that cork fly out, and I didn't create a huge pop. Okay. And some producers, some people like to have a pop. I think if you're in a celebratory kind of mood, if you're on a holiday or something like that, maybe a little pop is good because it kind of lets everybody know that there's something special going on here. And bubbles are usually associated with special occasions. I like to kind of control it a little bit. I like to just make sure that the wine isn't going to come foaming out, and one way to do that is to make sure that I put a good amount of counter pressure onto the wine, onto the cork, to make sure it just doesn't come flying out, and I get that nice kind of controlled thump, and it comes out. By holding the bottle at a 45-degree angle, I'm also creating a larger surface area for the bubbles, for the gas to dissipate from. If I hold the bottle like this and open it up, there's a very small surface area, and all the gas it wants to push out pushes against that small area. By turning the bottle on its side 45 degrees, I create a much larger surface area for those bubbles, for that gas to actually dissipate, and I find that you get almost no gas coming out of these bottles when you hold it at a 45-degree angle. So once I've opened it up, I have my bottle. I'm going to pour a little bit for my guest. And I'm going to stand aside and let the guest assess that bottle and make sure that the wine is sound. And from here on out, it's pretty much the same as a normal bottle of wine. I'm going to get approval from the guest, go around the table. One of the challenges, though, with sparkling wines and champagne is that you have the bubbles. So when you pour some wine into a glass, it tends to foam. And one of the things that is tricky if you're not used to it is making sure that you get a proper pour size. Now, if you have a small table, 2-4 guests, it's usually not that big a deal. You can pour some and do it relatively slowly, and as long as you're pretty careful to get everybody the same amount, then you'll be fine. If you have a little bit larger table, say you have 6 or 8 guests, you really have to think about how you're going to portion it out. You have to be familiar with your glassware and know where the limits are on that, and also how to pour sparkling wines. So just a little bit of experience comes into play there. So let's review real quickly. I'm going to treat a sparkling wine the same as I'm going to treat it as a cork finished bottle of wine or a screw cap finished bottle of wine. I'm going to retrieve it from the bar. I'm going to review the information that is on the label to make sure that I'm familiar with it. Once I get to the table, I'm going to present the bottle to my guest like I would any bottle of wine. And then I'm going to very carefully remove the foil around the top. At this point, I'm going to keep my thumb over the cage and cork so that it's not going to come flying off. I'm going to loosen the little tab, the key, on the cork itself. 5 turns usually does it. Once I've loosened it, I'm going to rotate my hand up over the top, hold the bottle at a 45-degree angle, twist once, twice, usually maybe 3 times does it, and I'm going to control that cork as it comes out of the bottle so that it's just got a nice little thud and not a big pop. Sometimes a pop's good though, but in a restaurant setting, for the most part, I like to kind of control it, a nice little thud, and then I'm going to pour the wine. And if I've got a little bit larger party, I just want to make sure that my pour sizes are going to allow me to get all the way around the table so that every guest has a chance to enjoy some sparkling wine from the bottle that I'm pouring. Really a great way to enhance a meal. Sparkling wines are often thought of as celebratory drinks, but they can be great throughout a meal. So let's serve more sparkling wine. By having good technique in opening these wines, really can enhance your service and enhance your guests' experience.